And aviation's always been in the back of my mind. I've always wanted to fly airplanes. And what I started doing was loitering around the Truckee airport and watching kind of what was going on and seeing what people were doing and what they were flying. And at that point, I really knew almost nothing. I could identify a Cessna, and that was about it. And so I marched down, and I ended up talking to the flight school down there and just started flying. And then over time, and the more and more I continued to fly, I just started to gravitate towards the backcountry stuff. You know, it was Quinn and a number of the other guys that fly locally out of Truckee as well that I'd watch every day pulling out and come home, and the big balloon tires and all this, the fun looking stuff. And, you know, that inspired me to keep going down that path. You know, as time went on, I tried to figure out what I wanted to do. And in 2020, the pandemic had just hit. I had been looking at Super Cubs for a couple of years. Finally kind of decided, okay, it's time to pull the trigger. I went to go look at Super Cubs again, and these things were going overnight for $100,000 more than they were the night before. So that just sort of led me down the path. All right, I think I'm gonna go after a new aircraft, and I wanna figure out how to make it unique and utilize my background and skills to, you know, sort of accomplish what I did. I'm a visual guy. I've worked in visual design my whole life. So when I ordered the plane and I started thinking through, oh, these color schemes, and do you want our off-the-shelf check boxes, you know, on the order form? I said, there's no way I'm ever doing that. So as I started thinking about what this aircraft could be, I've always been a huge fan of Lewis Carroll and Alice in Wonderland. So I started thinking through some of the characteristics, the characters, the story, what all these things mean. And the Cheshire Cat's always been this prominent role that I've always loved. Cheshire Cat's job was to guide Alice through Wonderland when she needed it. I mean, just sort of be that guiding force. And so as I thought about the plane more and more, there's a quote in chapter 6 of the book. Alice is wandering through Wonderland and she bumps into the Cheshire Cat. She says, oh, Cheshire Cat, I'm so glad to see you. Can you tell me which way I ought to go from here? He says, well, that depends a great deal on where you're trying to get to. She says, well, I don't much care where. He says, well, then it doesn't much matter which way you go. And I thought about that quote, and it's sort of the core fundamental of this plane and backcountry flying. It's about going and exploring. The world's your wonderland. You know, go this direction, land, hang out, and turn around, go the other way. And so I felt that the Cheshire Cat was just kind of the great guiding force. And when my kids were born, I always said, you know, my role in life is to be the Cheshire Cat and help guide them when they need. Otherwise, the world's their wonderland. Go make something great of it. And yeah, so it's the backstory on the Cheshire Cat. So as I, you know, continue to think about the aircraft and the idea of the Cheshire Cat, I had to kind of figure out how I was going to implement that and whether it was going to be paint or airbrush or vinyl wrap and all that sort of stuff. So going through the logistics and trying to figure that out was one process. And then I wanted to take it and sort of put the creative process on steroids even more than just coming up with an interesting scheme and wrap. And so I came up with this idea of the augmented reality, which taps just kind of that world of, you know, Wonderland and this nonsensical, sort of surreal other side, I call it, and added the QR code. If you scan the QR code and hold your phone up to the plane, the cat comes to life. And what I'm trying to do with that is utilize these digital technologies in sort of relevant ways to inspire, you know, the youth to see and understand and think creatively about these opportunities that may exist that aren't even thought about yet in the world of aviation. You know, I think as we get older as humans, we sort of grow out of this like natural creativity, weird way of thinking, you know, where everything's new and you're absorbing, where there's so much of that to be brought back into life when you get older as well. And I think like just these creative kids' brains, you give them an opportunity like this and you get those wheels turning about what can and does exist out there in the world and how technologies that exist can be plugged in and applied in realms of life that may have never even been thought about, like aviation. And, you know, taking QR, digital mediums, storytelling, you know, brand engagement, whatever you want to call it, and doing that in interesting, relevant ways, I think you can inspire youth to think differently about the opportunities that exist in general aviation in general.